Thank you for watching The Best Watch today. Today we're talking about Prince of Egypt.
Great movie. Very nostalgic. Came out a year after I was born, but I grew up watching the movie in my house.
Yes. I was very similar with Seth. We did grow up watching this movie, but we didn't really have an idea of how much of a big deal this film was. We'll just get started. It's created by DreamWorks, the same people that created Shrek. So heck
Just
yeah.
imagine that. The same people who have created the absolute monstrosity of green everything. The people who brought on the ideas of green Twinkies, green cream-filled Twinkies, whatever, are the same people responsible for probably one of the, I would venture to say, the best animated Bible story movie adaptation.
I would agree. So this film is starring Val Kilmer and go ahead. We'll just go
Ralph Fiennes,
Sandra Bullock,
Michelle Pfeiffer,
Steve Martin,
Jeff Goldblum,
Martin Short,
Danny Glover,
and Patrick Stewart. Heck yeah.
So we've got Doc Holliday in there, Ralph Fiennes, I don't know who he is. Sandra Bullock, Blindside, she was the mom. Michelle Pfeiffer, she was Catwoman in one of the Batman movies, I know. Steve Martin, Treated by the Dozen, Pink Panther, it's endless roles. Jeff Goldblum, Jurassic Park, Independence Day. Martin Short.
Patrick Stewart is obviously Charles Xavier.
Charles Xavier.
X-Men.
He's
Star Trek.
Captain Pickard on Star Trek, or Picard, as you say, on Star Trek. Very notable actors here. So just from the cast alone, especially given that these weren't like secondhand names at that time either. These were actors at this time. This was their prime. Back in 1998. They were huge in movies. Amazing cast.
It is incredible.
Absolutely
cast.
amazing cast. Great casting.
I wanted to point out a little bit of the artistic production that is in this film. And granted, it's not the same kind of production that you see in a live-action film. It's cartoon, it's animation. But let me tell you something. The amount of time that they put into this, I can't even begin to describe. Every single shot that you see, every single picture or image that you see is so incredibly beautifully designed. And to be honest, you only see a lot of these shots for like 3 seconds at a time. So there's thousands and thousands of these gorgeous pieces of work that they have put into this, just so much time. It's one of the most beautiful 2D animation films you'll ever see.
And that's another thing for people to think about. This wasn't computer-generated animation. This was actually like the old school kind of drawn on animation where they had, I want to say, I could be totally wrong, but I want to say they had 3,000 animators on this. It might be only 300. I can't remember. It's a lot of animators working around the clock on this movie, getting all the sets and all the characters drawn out.
The subtext in this film is crazy. And we'll just throw a few images on top of here. If you don't know what subtext is, just YouTube that and it'll explain a lot about what subtext is in films and stuff. But this one is just blown out of the park with the symbolism of the shots and the composition. It's crazy. You don't appreciate it, like me and Seth didn't appreciate it when we were younger because we didn't know what we were looking for. But going back and watching it now, it blew me away. I mean, genuinely, this film is crazy.
One of the biggest things about this movie is the soundtrack. Oh my goodness. I have a Spotify account, and when I was on the way up to my school one day, it's like a 2-hour drive for me, I just was like, you know what? I feel like listening to the Prince of Egypt soundtrack, and I just roll it on. It played the whole time, my whole drive. Amazing soundtrack, and not just the songs that are sung, but also just the sound score behind it. Especially one of the most beautiful parts was when Moses discovered the burning bush and realized that it was Jehovah God in the fire. And he goes down, and just the music that plays behind it that is just supportive to give you that spiritual essence. It is absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, I was weeping. And
it was amazing.
It was incredible. I truly was
incredible
crying.
Experience.
I did want to say, just because so many films get this wrong, but they really did some research on how the ethnicity of the Hebrew and the Egyptian people actually looked, and they created their characters to be extremely accurate, which is a big deal. I mean, a lot of times people take that for granted, but just to get accuracy with the way the people looked.
You can actually even tell apart like the Egyptians from the Hebrews, you know, because they went into detail showing that these are two different kind of people from two different kind of like ethnicities, you know. They really went into detail with this, something that DreamWorks did a very good job on making this movie.
One thing I just wanted to also mention before I let Seth get into his rant a little bit about what he thinks was wrong or an issue with the film itself, I did want to mention that I really appreciate that even though this film was geared towards probably a younger audience, kids and stuff. That's
and a more modest audience in general of people who just wanted to see a Bible story.
They were not afraid to shy away from the actual like historical accounts of the violent things that Pharaoh did, and just like with so many deaths that take place in the film, they don't shy away from it. They make it very clear as to what happened, but in a way they also did it in a safe environment, in a very artistic way, using hieroglyphics and stuff, and it's just very thought through. And I just wanted to make that so like as you're watching it to like notice that.
One of the things when it comes to the Prince of Egypt is, yes, it's Hollywood, and just like Hollywood always does with any kind of Bible story movie adaptation, it takes a lot of liberty in its script writing. And probably the biggest inaccuracy in the whole movie was how Moses killed the Egyptian. Now in the movie you see Moses, he's just like basically found out that he was actually adopted and he's actually Hebrew, which, by the way, we're not really sure if that's how it happened anyway, because in the Bible it just talks about he went back to his people. It never really gives an account of him like finding it out. So we kind of assume that he really just knew all along anyway, since his original mother actually nursed him anyway. He was halfway raised by his biological mother, but adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. But you see him, he goes and he sees his Hebrew people like working hard, being enslaved, slave-drived and stuff, and there's this one being abused by one of the Egyptians, and he goes up there and he tries to bat the Egyptian like off of the Hebrew slave, but he accidentally knocks him off of a ledge and and he dies. But in the biblical account, it was actually a lot more gruesome. See, Moses came upon the Egyptian, he was abusing a Hebrew slave, and it actually says Moses looked around to make sure nobody was around to see at first, killed the Egyptian brutally, and hid him in the sand. And then he found out later that other Hebrews had saw him, and then he became afraid, thinking that everybody was going to find out. And then Pharaoh eventually did find out, and Pharaoh sought out to kill Moses, and that's why Moses went out into the wilderness. They kind of really tried to play off the idea of Pharaoh and Moses being brothers, which really isn't biblical at all either. But I can kind of see why they changed that for that aspect. But the fact is, it's just not biblical in that sense.
Also, I did want to mention Moses and what was her name? Zipporah, which was his wife. They actually meet in the film a good ways off, and I don't know if you'll pick up on it. We thought we'd just point it out for you because it's a sweet reference.
You know, something that the Prince of Egypt does in this movie is they really create this romantic love story between Moses and Zipporah, because she enters into the movie as just like a wandering girl that was out in the desert that they picked up and they were going to give over to Ramses. And then when she bit at Ramses decided he wasn't into that, so he gave her over to Moses, and Moses eventually set her free. But we find out very early on that Moses was actually in love with Zipporah, because as he goes to try to detain her as she's trying to escape, she's bound up by a rope by her hands, and she's trying to pull away from him as Moses holds on to the other end of the rope, and she says, "Release me!" And he kind of looks back behind her and just says, "As you wish," which he actually meant, I love you.
As we know from The Princess Bride. So thank you guys so much for watching this week's Best Watch. Go to wiseworksproduction.com to see the after show, and join us next week again for a Halloween version of Best Watch.
Don't forget to give your input on Halloween movies. Be sure to leave them in the comments down below.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Salutations.
We'll see you next week.